Hello and welcome to the return of the VideoVortex in our new revamped studio, and this week we're going to be looking at some underrated zombie classics that you might not have heard of. The first one is 1981's Burial Ground, seen here as The Zombie Dead, which is one of its UK titles. Directed by Andrea Bianchi, I hope I've pronounced that right. A lot of Italian horror movie directors, particularly people like Lucio Fulci, identified as being Marxists at the time. Marxists are interested in this idea that the ruling class, what they called the bourgeoisie, control the proletariat, which is working class people in society, and you can see some of that commentary in this movie. Now, if you like your blood, guts and gore like I do, you'll enjoy this movie anyway. The plot itself doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why I'm not going to go into it in a great detail, because there's not a lot to go into. However, there's some interesting symbolism. In this movie's cast, Argentinian actor Peter Bark, who at the time was 26-year-old, he is a little person. At the time, they would have referred to little people as midgets, which is quite an offensive term to some people to this day. But he's cast largely due to two reasons. First of all, the child labour laws in filmmaking at the time in Italy, most European countries, but also the influence of the Italian filmmaker Pasolini, who was interested in the work of Friedrich Engels. Now, Engels was big on the idea that property well, he wasn't a fan of it, but he talked about it. He argued that wealth and land was passed down, particularly from one family generation to the next, from one man to another, which maintained wealth and status amongst the bourgeoisie, or we might call them the upper class. And in this movie, you see the bourgeoisie being quite decadent in this massive kind of mansion. At one point, one of the characters says, I think it's to his wife, "You're dressed just like a little whore," but I like that in a woman. And it's interesting in Peter Bark's casting is he plays a child in this movie, and you see this kind of incestuous relationship with the mother, this idea that things are passing on through the family. Some of the Marxist imagery doesn't kind of work too well, but it's a kind of interesting metaphor in a way. And the child character is really strange. One person says, "This cloth smells like death." There's another bit where he tries to have erotic relations with his mother. Those of you into Freud, God help you. Personally, I think it's all made up. Be interested in I think it's called Oedipus complex. I'm mildly dyslexic, so I can't spell it. Never mind how they pronounce it. But there's a bit where he wants to suckle on his mother's breasts, and the actor's 26 years old. Interesting kind of symbolism going on there. If you think that's a bit creepy, you should check out some of the creepy zombies in this title. I think it's a really underrated classic, and Arrow are doing a DVD and Blu-ray release soon. So it's well worth checking out. Callum Waldell, I think he's called, does some excellent extras on their DVDs. Next up is Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue from 1974, directed by Georges Grau. And this is a really underrated movie. This is one of the pearls in the horsepucky of zombie movies from the 1970s. This movie actually has a world record of having the most number of titles in different parts of the world. It has 16, I think, different titles. And this movie has a really interesting central performance by Arthur Kennedy, who's a really notable actor. He was nominated for 5 different supporting actor roles. He was even in Lawrence of Arabia, and like a lot of actors, people like Dennis Price in the early 70s, their kind of careers went downhill a bit as movies became a bit more interested in big Hollywood stars and blockbuster films. And also in the movie you get Ray Lovelock as well, who was a really interesting actor. He appeared in Fiddler on the Roof. That was his real name, Ray Lovelock. It was a pseudonym. But also he appeared in films like Oasis of Fear, I think it is, released by Shameless on DVD. On the cover you have, how can I put this politely, a lady entertaining him in his nether regions on the cover, and he's got like a Union Jack cloak on in the background. Really interesting actor. It's a really kind of anti-establishment vibe about this movie. So Arthur Kennedy's character is trying to pin a murder that goes on to him and the girl he teams up with in this movie. And he's not done it. It was created by zombies, one of which is called Guthrie the Loon, which I really like. And in a scene shot in Castleton, which if you live in the kind of like Manchester or Derbyshire area in Stockport, well worth checking out. He actually sort of says to the policeman like, "Heil Hitler," everyone's in a kind of fake Cockney accent, which is interesting because he's supposed to be from Manchester. That's how kind of anti-establishment this movie is. It's got that kind of weird, trippy, hippie 60s, 70s vibe about it, and it's really atmospheric as well. If you want to check out some of the locations, I kind of snuck in one night to Barnes Hospital in Cheadle, and you shouldn't trespass. Don't do that, but I'm sure they won't mind you going up to the railings and taking some pictures through it. I think an episode of Most Haunted was done there. That's in Cheadle, Cheshire, on the edge of Stockport. Hathersage is where the church is as well. I've been there because I'm a massive movie geek. But I think this movie is really underrated. There's a really interesting performance by one of the lead female actresses. At the time, her partner in real life, I think it was her husband, had actually died, and she's going to play like a heroin addict in this movie, and she's looking really spaced out. It's because in real life a partner just died. So, you know, full credit to the actress. And this is a really good DVD presentation. I think there is a Blu-ray on the way if there's not one out already. This is the Anchor Bay version. Just a few minor cuts to it. It's also known by the title of Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. I mean, what else do you want? This is a zombie classic. Next up is Zombie Creeping Flesh, also known as Hell of the Living Dead, from 1980, directed by Bruno Mattei. This movie pretends to have some sort of social commentary. It doesn't really, although it has a great line on the back. Zombie Creeping Flesh actually makes a serious point that if you don't feed the third world, they'll come and feed on you. I'd love to tell you that this film had enormous depth to it. It doesn't whatsoever. You might read into a bit of commentary on the dangers of nuclear waste and things that go on, but I wouldn't personally. This is just a really good, fun movie. It's a really mash-up. At the time, kind of goes back to the late 60s. There was a series of films known as Mondo movies where they went to different cultures, and some would argue exploited them, but they were kind of like travelogue films where you'd see a little bit of kind of developing world cannibals, and then you'd see what might seem like strange practices in other cultures, and they'd put them into a movie. This movie, there's got a bit of cannibalism and a bit of zombie action in there as well. It's a massive rip-off of George A. Romero's 1978 classic Dawn of the Dead as well. They borrow, that's a liberal use of the word, music from Dawn of the Dead as well, and you're going to get a SWAT team in there quite early on. Some really funny dialogue in this movie, and one of the zombies looks like my old science teacher from Offerton High School, Mr. Rogers. If you're watching, you're a pretty good teacher. You're a groovy dude. Not too sure about the haircut, but yeah, I really like this. One character says to the other, "What the women like there?" And he goes, "Naked and wild." There's some really interesting observations about this universal idea of masculinity. There's a scene where they're in the power plant at the beginning and they're just talking about women, and it's supposed to be, you know, like lads. Most lads I know, you know, we talk about women and sometimes it gets a bit, oh, you know what I mean? But it seems really like weird, like the fake kind of English accents that go on in this movie. Fascinating stuff. I can't repeat some of it in case some of my students are watching, but watch it at the start of this film. There's loads of found footage, and a lot of like horror directors pick up this movie and say it's really good fun. 1 minute they'll be in like the Amazon rainforest, the next minute you've got stock footage from like Africa and New Zealand and places like that. I couldn't describe my love for this movie other than to say that this is a great little party tape for Friday night with some of your hombres, get some nachos, some pizza, and watch the magnificent Zombie Creeping Flesh. Next up is Umberto Lenzi's Nightmare City from 1980. This is a real kind of guilty pleasure. It's interesting, Umberto Lenzi was one of Italy's most notable directors, perhaps not one of the most respected. He did a few cannibal movies, which can be a bit tasteless, although cannibal movies were never quite the bastion of tastes as the works of people like Fellini. But I really like this movie. A pure guilty pleasure. There's a scene where, and I'm not going to spoil it, but a plane flies in at the beginning. Not sure who's supposed to be flying it, and all these radioactive zombies kind of get off the plane. Now, Lenzi didn't claim that they were actually zombies. He argued that they were more like ghouls, behave a lot more like vampires, and they actually use weapons, and they wear terrible makeup, like the face has just like been dipped in a peat bog in Derbyshire. However, it's some really interesting sequences in it. There's a fairground ride, which in my opinion was paid homage to in the Left 4 Dead games, like some of the house sequences in Burial Ground. And also as well, there's some kind of social commentary for you kind of sociologists out there in a sequence where they talk about dangers to the environment. As usual, the American military are pretty useless, but no more useless than some of the central characters who just kind of randomly stand there. And there's some kind of dodgy kind of sequences where you think, well, why they just stood there, why they're not acting. But some people have argued this movie's supposed to have a dream logic, and without spoiling, you could argue that was true. The last 5 minutes is a bit of a scandalous rip-off, some people have argued. Some people see it as arty genius. The title, well, no, it's not the title card, but the card that comes up at the end of this movie, It's so quotable, and I desperately want to say it, but I won't ruin it for you. You might feel a bit cheated by the end of this movie, but I just think it's laugh out loud funny. This is a really good film. It's got a really good pace to it. It doesn't get bogged down in too much unnecessary story. If you just want to watch a fun zombie movie without having to think too much, Nightmare City is a masterpiece, and I think this is getting an Arrow Blu-ray release as well. Well done, you Arrow boys and girls. This is an excellent, it will be an excellent release, I'm sure. This is the Blue Underground release. Now, I'd love to include a movie called Shockwaves from 1977, but I've not actually seen it, starring Peter Cushing and John Carradine. It's a bit difficult to get hold of. If you've seen it, put something in the comment box and let me know how you got on. But this one is one to avoid. I thought I would just throw it in. But it's an interesting little timepiece. This is Zombie Lake from 1981. Directed by Gene Rowling, who was famous for making some quite terrible movies. Jess Franco had a chance to direct this movie, but pulled out at the last minute. What can I say in terms of exploitation? This was one of the early kind of Nazi zombie films that were really rocking around. I mentioned Shockwaves before. This is like bargain basement nonsense from start to finish. It stars Howard Vernon, who has about 192 film and TV credits, and in the opening scene you get a bit of exploitative female pubic hair as a woman's kind of, it shows it's like the 70s, early 80s, just lying by this lake. She's like, oh, it's sunbathing. And then these kind of green painted zombies from the Second World War return, as you do, and there's some kind of weird kind of Frankenstein-ness going on, something to do with like an amulet, and a zombie befriends a child. By this point, I was so kind of turned off by the untitillating nudity and terrible kind of bolted on swearing in this movie. I couldn't care less. But it's actually quite rustic. If you like the outdoors, you might actually like Zombie Lake. If you like kind of lakeside pursuits, if you like certain areas of like Derbyshire and Lancashire, and certain areas of Stoke, you might like this. And apparently they're waiting for you just beneath the surface. So instead of going swimming this weekend, I'd probably get a book and perhaps read something else instead. Thank you for watching the return of the Video Vortex. I know I've not been around for a while, not been feeling too well, but I've returned from the cinematic grave to introduce you to some zombie classics. There will be a vampire episode on the way soon, and I'm hoping to do a Guilty Pleasures episode 3 to introduce you to something called Bruce Exploitation. Say thank you to all the viewers, and a special thank you to all my students from this year. I wish you all the best of luck at university, especially those of you that got me presents and cards and things at the end of the course. I'll try and remember all your names: Michelle, Catherine, Annalise, Joshua, Martine, etc. Please forgive me for forgotten any names there. All the best for university, and thank you very much for watching the return of the Video Vortex.